September 3, 1939, is widely regarded as a turning point in modern history. On this day, the United Kingdom and France, in response to the German invasion of Poland 2 days earlier, declared war on Nazi Germany, formally initiating World War II in Europe. This critical moment marked the end of an era of appeasement and the beginning of a global conflict that would devastate continents and forever alter the balance of power in the world. To fully grasp the significance of this day, it is essential to examine the Allies' decision to declare war, Germany's response, the international reaction, and the media coverage. The Allies' decision. The end of appeasement. Since Adolf Hitler's rise to power in 1933, the United Kingdom and France had pursued a policy of appeasement towards Nazi Germany, hoping to avoid direct military conflict. However, Hitler's expansionist ambitions, evidenced by the remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936, the Anschluss with Austria in 1938, and the occupation of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, eroded this strategy. The invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, was the breaking point. On the morning of September 3, the British government, led by Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, sent an ultimatum to Berlin demanding the withdrawal of German forces from Poland by 11 a.m. When this ultimatum expired without a response, Chamberlain made a radio announcement to the nation at 11:15, declaring that the United Kingdom was at war with Germany. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin delivered to the German government a final note, stating that unless we received satisfactory assurances that the German government was willing to withdraw its troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no assurances have been received, and consequently, this country is at war with Germany, Chamberlain declared, his voice grave and somber. Almost simultaneously, French President Édouard Daladier made a similar announcement. France, with its security commitments to Poland and seeking to honor the Franco-Polish alliance, followed the United Kingdom and declared war on Germany. The decision was met with a mix of resignation and determination, knowing the cost would be high but with a clear understanding that Hitler's aggression could not be tolerated. Germany's response. Disdain and defiance. Hitler's response to the Allies' declaration of war was one of disdain and defiance. He had anticipated a reaction from the Allies, but believed that, after the conquest of Poland, the United Kingdom and France would resign themselves to a negotiated peace, as they had after the occupation of Czechoslovakia. This expectation was fueled by the perception that British and French leaders lacked the will to fight. Hitler and his generals, convinced of German military superiority and the weakness of the Western Allies, were not inclined to withdraw their forces from Poland. The newly tested and victorious German war machine was at the height of its confidence. The Nazi government quickly moved to prepare for the defense of the Western Front while consolidating its gains in Poland. International reaction. Shock and mobilization. The declaration of war by the United Kingdom and France had global repercussions. In the United States, the news was met with apprehension. Although most Americans supported the United Kingdom and France, there was a predominant desire to keep the country out of the war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, in a radio address, reiterated the U.S. policy of neutrality but also emphasized moral support for the European allies. In Moscow, the response was ambivalent. The Soviet Union, which had signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Germany in August 1939, was temporarily allied with the Nazi regime. While there was a formal condemnation of German aggression, Stalin was more interested in securing the terms of the Pact's secret protocol, which divided Poland between the two powers and established spheres of influence in Eastern Europe. Other countries, such as Italy and Japan, observed the developments with cautious interest. Benito Mussolini, although allied with Hitler through the Pact of Steel, was not ready to enter the war alongside Germany. He preferred to wait and see how events would unfold before committing Italy to a potentially devastating conflict. Media coverage and public opinion. The media played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the war's outset. In the United Kingdom, Chamberlain's war announcement was broadcast by the BBC and heard by millions. The news was received with a mix of sadness and determination. British newspapers, such as The Times and the Daily Telegraph, published editorials emphasizing the need to resist Nazi aggression. The Times proclaimed, "Britain once more faces a tyrant. We did not seek this fight, but we will respond with courage and strength." In France, Le Monde and Le Figaro reflected a public divided between the fear of a new conflict and the need to honor international commitments and defend freedom. The painful memory of World War I was still fresh in the minds of many French, but there was a growing consensus that appeasement was no longer a viable option. In the United States, newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post covered the declaration of war with detailed reports and extensive analysis, focusing on both political implications and consequences for the global economy. The prevailing narrative in the American press was one of moral support for the Allies, but with a clear desire to avoid direct involvement in the conflict. Immediate consequences and war preparations. The Allies' declaration of war was not followed by an immediate offensive on the Western Front. This initial period of the conflict is often referred to as the phony war or drôle de guerre. Despite the declared hostilities, there was no significant fighting between Allied and German forces along the Maginot Line and the western border of Germany during the first months of the war. The British and French armies began to mobilize and strengthen their defenses. The British Expeditionary Force, BEF, was sent to France to support the French army, while both countries reinforced their defensive lines along the border with Germany. However, the lack of immediate offensive action led to both internal and external criticism that the Allies were once again underestimating the threat posed by Nazi Germany. In Germany, Hitler ordered the High Command to prepare for a possible attack in the West. He believed that the best defense was an offense and began planning the invasion of France and the Low Countries. The Blitzkrieg, which had proven so effective in Poland, would now be adapted for a different, more complex theater of war. Social impact and national mobilization. In the United Kingdom, the declaration of war brought immediate changes to daily life. The government introduced food and consumer goods rationing to ensure resources were sufficient for a prolonged war effort. Civil defense was mobilized, and blackout measures were implemented to protect cities from potential air raids. A spirit of unity and resistance began to grow, reflected in the words of Winston Churchill, who would soon become Prime Minister. "We are preparing for what may be the hardest struggle of our history." In France, mobilization was equally comprehensive, though there was a palpable sense of apprehension and painful memories of World War I. The Maginot Line, a series of fortifications along the Franco-German border, was seen as a bulwark against any German advance. However, as weeks passed without significant confrontation, many began to question the effectiveness of this defensive line and the overall military strategy. Political and strategic reflections. The decision to declare war on Germany on September 3, 1939, marked a point of no return for the United Kingdom and France. Unlike World War I, which was triggered by a complex web of alliances and assassinations, World War II was a direct confrontation between Hitler's aggressive expansionism and the European democracies determined to stop him. September 3, 1939, marked the end of appeasement and the beginning of a conflict that would rapidly become global. It also highlighted the Allies' strategic failures in the early months of the war, a complacency that Germany would soon exploit in its 1940 Western campaign. For many, this was the beginning of a struggle for survival against totalitarianism and oppression. As Neville Chamberlain stated in his speech to Parliament, "We have to face the fact that, from this moment, we are at war not because we desire it, but because we have no other choice." World War II had begun, and the world was once again plunged into the darkness of war. Conclusion. September 3, 1939, is a landmark in world history, symbolizing the start of a conflict that would define the 20th century. The decision by the United Kingdom and France to declare war on Germany was a last-ditch effort to confront a rising threat, but also an acknowledgement that the time for concessions had ended. The ensuing war would see alliances shift, empires collide, and entire nations devastated. It was a conflict that proved as much moral as it was military, a test of human resolve against an ideology seeking to dominate the world. The impact of this day would resonate in the decades to come, shaping the modern world in ways we are still striving to fully understand.